I'd like to welcome everybody to this extraordinary meeting of the Council here in the Council Chamber. Can I ask everyone present not to talk amongst yourselves during the meeting, as this can be very distracting for others who are listening to the debate. Can I also ask everyone to ensure any mobile devices are switched to silent and do not cause a distraction during the meeting. I would like to remind members that where they are able to, they are required to stand when addressing the meeting. We are not expecting a fire alarm tonight, but if one should occur, please follow the officers out of the building to the assembly point on Manchester Road. The meeting is being live streamed, and I would like to welcome those watching the Council's YouTube channel. Let us all remember to treat members and of the public, elected members and officers with respect throughout the meeting as set out in the Code of Conduct for members. Before we move to the formal business on tonight's agenda, I would like to ask everyone to please stand if they are able to do so, whilst we hold 1 minute silence in the honour of the 3 little girls who have tragically lost their lives in Southport stabbing attack. Please sit. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda, minutes of the meeting held on 17th of July 2024 on pages 5 to 8 of the agenda pack. I will move those minutes. Mr. Deputy Mayor, will you second those minutes?
I'll second those minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Item number 2 on the agenda, declaration of interest.
Ask a question, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I am a pensioner and I am in receipt. I have been in receipt of winter fuel payments. Am I allowed to speak on that tonight, as I am a pensioner and I'm in receipt of that? Am I allowed to speak on it and vote on it?
Thank you, Councillor Birtwistle. Can I get some legal advice on that, Catherine?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. I would expect that there are a number of members that might be impacted by the question that Councillor Birtwistle has asked. I believe it is in order for you to be able to speak, because this decision, it's a motion. It's a motion you're asking central government to do something, but by voting on it either way, it's not actually impacting directly on, it's not a decision-making function of this authority. So I think it's in order for you to be able to speak and vote. Thank you.
Thank you, and Catherine. And are there any other declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda, motions to the Council. Once a motion has been moved and seconded, members may speak once for a maximum of 5 minutes. They may only speak again on an amendment. Members will be aware that supplementary agendas have been published this afternoon with an amendment to agenda items 3A and 3B. The monitoring officer is satisfied that those amendments are relevant to the original motions. Just bear with me. Agenda item 3A, motion regarding a county combined authority for Lancashire on pages 9 and 10 in the agenda pack. Councillor Townsend, will you please move your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, can I just say thank you for suggesting that we have a meeting to discuss this important matter at the last ordinary meeting of the council, and for subsequently arranging this meeting. So thank you for that. Just very quickly, a recap, and these words are in the motion. So the situation has changed. The King's speech recently in Parliament was very clear that the government's approach to devolution has changed. There is a proposal now for basically to establish a council of the nations and the regions, and we want Lancashire to be at the heart of that council, I believe. Expressions of interest for a first wave of deals to be submitted by the end of September, so it's important that we discuss this matter. And those with strong and accountable governance models will get the best deals. So things have changed since we last discussed this matter. The deal that was agreed previously by the upper tiers is a poor one. I think we all accepted that at the time. It's a third-rate deal. It sidelines all districts, including Burnley, councillors sitting in Preston, Blackburn and Blackpool, making the big decisions, imposing their will on this town. This council's current position by resolution that was passed in January is to support that deal, despite it being rejected by Burnley residents in the consultation. The intention of the upper tier councils is to pursue the implementation of that deal with the new government if they can. So I think it's important that this council expresses a view this evening in terms of where it currently is, in terms of its attitude to devolution and moving forward on this. May I say I welcome the recent letters to the Deputy Prime Minister and Lancashire MPs, signed by 9 Lancashire leaders, including Councillor Anwar, supporting a rethink on Lancashire devolution. I think that's a positive step and one that this council should seriously consider. But moving to the actual motion itself that's in front of you this evening, I'm hoping now there's going to be pretty much agreement across this council in terms of aligning where the Labour group was in January and where perhaps the coalition is now from where they were just a few months ago in terms of moving this forward. Point 1 of the resolution calls to scrap the current proposal. And in the letter that Councillor Anwar has signed to the Deputy Prime Minister, it's clear, it says, the current deal should not progress as currently planned. So not using the same word, but certainly very clear in terms of its intention that the current deal should not be progressed, so basically scrap it. Point 2 of the resolution says let's withdraw support from the current county combined authority and write to the upper tier authorities to that effect, thereby withdrawing the support we gave them by letter in January of this year. The letters to MPs and the Deputy Prime Minister reflects a major shift in policy of this council from supporting the CCA as per this council's response to the consultation in January. The upper tiers now need to be formally informed of this council's withdrawal of support for their CCA. And I don't think that should give us any difficulty. We just need to be able to do that. Otherwise, those upper tiered authorities can still go to government and basically says, last time Burnley Council spoke about this, they agreed with us. And that's the last resolution that's on the table. Point 3 of the resolution submit a more ambitious devolution proposal with stronger, more accountable and inclusive governance arrangements. So that's the motion that's in front of you tonight. Again, the letter that Councillor Anwar has now signed, it says in there, should seek a more ambitious devolution settlement with clearer, more visible and more democratically accountable governance arrangements. So I think it's absolutely clear that we're pretty much on the same page in terms of what this council's approach should be to devolution. And point 4 of the resolution calls on government to legislate to help us break the impasse. There's no need for local government reorganisation. Retain the 15 councils we have, but we cannot let the blockers of this county prevail for much longer. We've been debating this for the best part of a decade now, and because there's been councils out there who knew they had a veto, that's what stopped Lancashire moving forward and has held the majority back. For obvious reasons, the 3 upper tier councils are not going to agree to this, because obviously they have all the power and all the say on the current proposals. But we have to be realistic as well. Perhaps not all districts are going to sign up to basically the same deal. But I think it's clear that 9 council leaders have signed those letters to the Deputy Prime Minister and to the MPs, so there is a majority view that prevails within Lancashire. So this motion simply formalises, I believe, the position the Leader of the Council has already taken when signing the letters to governments and MPs recently. In January, this council boarded, in my opinion, our opinion, the wrong bus for the wrong reasons, putting internal council disagreements we were having at that time ahead of the strategic long-term thinking that we should have been having. We've all put on record our commitment to devolution, and we should be respecting the feedback from our residents as well, that they did not want this deal that is currently on the table. So what we need to do is this evening provide, I believe, a clear mandate for the Leader of the Council to go into detailed negotiations with these other Lancashire leaders to try and build a consensus if he can, but if not, to build the best solution and basically take with us as many of those leaders as possible, a majority, to get the best deal for Lancashire, and making sure that this council basically gets back on the inside track of what it wants for devolution, joins our like-minded councils across Lancashire to get a deal that basically will benefit the residents of Lancashire. And let's get us out of the slow lane and into the fast lane on devolution. I move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, will you please second the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second Councillor Townsend's motion.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Anwar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with regards to the motion, I'd just like to make a couple of comments and agree basically with a lot of what Councillor Townsend has said. In terms of where we were in January, in terms of the deal that was on the table and what was on offer from the previous government, we felt as a council at the time that that was the best deal, the only show in town, and we needed to get on board that bus to ensure that Burnley and Lancashire didn't get left behind. But since we've had a change in government and the information that we've had coming out and the letters that we've had from the Secretary of State, that goes to show that the narrative has changed, and there is and potentially better deals and a better offer that will be available for places like Burnley, and particularly for places like Lancashire, to have those devolved powers that every single one of us want. We want more of a say in what happens in our locality. And just as a point of clarification as well, what I would like to say is that following the conversations in the chamber at the last full council meeting and also outside of that chamber, listening to what other group leaders had to say on what we needed to be or where we needed to be, I took that decision and put my name as the leader of Burnley Council to a letter that went to MPs and to the Secretary of State saying that we wanted to withdraw from that deal, which is the letter that Councillor Townsend is referring to. As I said, I do agree with a lot of what Councillor Townsend has said, but I would like to move an amendment which actually, I feel, further strengthens a lot of what Councillor Townsend has said as well. The amendment has been shared with members. It did come out late in the day, so I appreciate that not everybody will have had a chance to go through it, but I won't read out every single point on the original motion, but I will read out the changes or the amendments that are being made. So the first thing that I would like to say is that at point D, the amendment is
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. And is that seconded?
I'd like to second the amendment, Mr Mayor, and reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope all members had a chance to look at the amendment. And we've also had a briefing. Do members require an adjournment or not, or can we move forward with the discussion? Any member on the discussion around the amendment? Councillor Townsend?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I welcome Councillor Anwar giving me a heads up when I arrived at the Town Hall tonight that this amendment was in the pipeline, so it has given me a few minutes just to have a look at it. So I do have one or two comments, but overall we have no problem with the amendment as written. As he says, it does strengthen, but I just would like to go through some of the points. In terms of the consultation, everybody poo-poos certain consultations. The fact is, those residents who did respond in Burnley did reject the idea. And it's interesting that the unitary authorities used the evidence of that consultation to justify their presentation to government to actually approve it. So even though we didn't get as much engagement as we would always like, it is a fact. Burnley and Padding residents rejected it, and I'm pleased that their views are being listened to tonight. In terms of point F, and the Secretary of State's preference for mayoral combined authorities, absolutely welcome this proposal in terms of moving forward. We need the strongest possible devolution deal, and let's hope that the next time mayors are taking a selfie outside Downing Street, we have a Lancashire mayor amongst that and going inside and fighting Lancashire's corner and Burnley's corner as part of that. The districts are no longer excluded from submitting alternative proposals. Again, absolutely a great new approach from the new government in being more collaborative on this subject rather than trying to impose a shotgun deal on Lancashire. So that is to be welcomed, where our voice can be heard. On the strictly on the premise that local government reorganisation is not a condition, totally agree. This is implicit in motion point 4 that I actually put forward, where I state 15 councils. If reorganisation is even suggested as part of this, we may as well all pack up and go home, because it ain't going to happen if we all start talking about reorganisation and how you would reorganise local authorities. It would just fail again. So absolutely happy for that to be included. In terms of writing to the upper tier authorities to explain our new position, I am pleased that the coalition have now come round to our way of thinking. Delighted that the ambition is now driving the force behind, is now the driving force behind this subject instead of the political convenience that we had in January. In my opinion, this council rolled over to the upper tier authorities with that letter that we sent in January. I think it was a big mistake, and I'm pleased that we appear to be putting that mistake right tonight. And coming to the final points, with full district council involvement where reasonably practical, one member, one vote on all matters, I was just saying, I think we're just saying the same thing in just different ways, because you know, simple majority is what it is. Where it's a veto, you just found more words than I did to explain the same thing, I think. So again, happy with that. But further to that, point E, support a directly elected mayor for Lancashire, if that's the only way of getting a deal. Absolutely, let's get Lancashire to the top table and a seat on the Council of Nations and Regions. That's where we all want to be, that's where we need to be, and Burnley at the heart of decision making in Lancashire. And ask the CEO to provide a copy of this change position to all Lancashire councils. Absolutely. Let's make it clear that Burnley's back in the game, right to the heart of the negotiations, singing from the same hymn book as the majority of councils in Lancashire, trying to get the best deal for Lancashire. So we're happy to support this amendment, Mr. Mayor, and yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. And Councillor Jamie McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our new MP who's joined us in the council chamber tonight. I hope he stays for the last motion on the winter fuel payment, but it's good to see him in Burnley. On this CCA, I think that, and we've spoken about this as a council previously. Back in January of this year, we voted to support this upper tier deal, the CCA deal, that is still on the table. And I just wanted to put it on record, really, that we are waiting to see whether that gets the green light or not. And as the letter that the Deputy Prime Minister has sent to us outlines, there's going to be a new framework due in September for the way that we can go about devolution. So I think we're moving. The idea that we need to have speed on this right now, I think is stretching it slightly. I know that there has been opposition to the DCA deal that we have. That is. Thank you to the Deputy Mayor for that. Yeah, I know there's been some opposition to the CCA deal we have, but let's remember this was a deal which meant that we didn't lose control to Blackburn, which is what Councillor Townsend put forward previously. There was no loss of powers. There is no loss of powers for this council, and there is no closing down of Burnley Town Hall. These things were all on the agenda back in 2018 when the Labour Party were running this council at the time, were putting forward. And like I say, the new framework's due in September. I just think we need to wait to see what the new framework is. In 30 days, we're not going to be able to come up with a detailed proposal working with other district councils across Lancashire. And I just think at the moment, we just need to wait to see what happens. And for that reason, I won't be supporting tonight's motion. Because I think that in 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, we could have the CCA deal approved, or we could have a new set of guidance of how we go about that. And at that stage, I'll be more than happy to get involved under the new guidance issued by the government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. And any other members on this issue? So this is on the amendment that Councillor Anwar put forward. Any other members? No? Okay. Councillor Anwar, as a mover of the amendment, you have the right of reply.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not much to add, really. Just to make the point clear that we were in a very different position under the previous government in terms of the deal that was on the table. And the feeling here was that we needed to get on that bus and be a part of that so Lancashire wouldn't get left behind. We've had a change in government, and I'm not stubborn enough, or it's not about me, it's about doing the best for Burnley, doing the best for Lancashire. We've listened to what the information that's come out, we've listened to what members have got to say, and if there's a better deal, we will go for the best deal that's on the table for Lancashire. And in answer to one of the questions raised by Councillor McGowan was around, is there a need for speed? Do we need to do this now? And I think we do, because the ask coming from the Secretary of State is that they want expressions of interest by the end by September. So we need to get that information out there, and a letter out to the Secretary of State stating that we do not want to continue with the deal what we signed up for previously with the upper tiers, but what we would like to do is an expression of interest with like-minded Lancashire leaders that would deliver the best deal for Lancashire as set out in this amendment. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend, as mover of the original motion, would you like to exercise your right to reply?
I've only, well, obviously, Councillor McGowan's spoken since I last spoke. So I'd just like to respond to Councillor McGowan. Can I just be clear, because you used that a number of times about local government reorganisation and Blackburn and things like that, quite a number of times. Can I just be absolutely clear to you and spell it out? Under my leadership and anybody else's leadership, I don't believe there's ever been a resolution in this council that ever said there should be a unitary authority covering East Lancashire that included Blackburn and CD Powers. Now, you can correct me if you want, go and try and find it on the internet tonight or whatever, but there's never been a council resolution in this chamber put forward or voted on any of that. So you keep bringing that scarecrow, that Aunt Sally, whatever, but I'd like to shoot your fox once and for all. And let's have it right. You spend more time in Blackburn than I do. Let's see how much time have you spent? If you spent a bit more time here fighting for the residents of this town, instead of selling Blackburn, we might, you know, we could take you seriously. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We will now move to a vote on the amendment. And can I ask one of the council officers to read out the full amendment, please?
Thank you.
All those in favour, please show. Yeah, we okay. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. The amendment is now carried, now becomes a substantive motion. We'll now take a vote on the substantive motion, which has already been read out. And I would have read it out myself, but I did not have the script in front of me. All those in favour of the substantive motion, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. The substantive motion is carried. Item number 3B, motion regarding paddy and flood defences on page 11 of the agenda pack. Can I ask Councillor McGowan, will you please move your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've moved my motion. And in moving my motion, I do want to speak. I do want to speak on this. I think it's right to say that we're all shocked to see the cost of the paddy and flood defences more than double from a figure of 18 million to over 30 in 2020, only 4 years ago, to now 36 million today. And as I've put in the motion, regardless of why the costs have increased so dramatically, it's imperative they're built in full. Making sure residents and businesses in Padiham are protected from a repeat of what we saw in 2015 is crucial, because nobody should have to live with this worry hanging over their heads. The former MP, Anthony Higginbotham, successfully secured 18 million to complete the flood defences. Work has started with walls already built both behind Padiham Town Hall and at the side of Bentwood Close, but the full project's not yet complete. With the Environment Agency reporting rising costs, the Council should be calling on the new Labour MP to lobby as hard as the last to secure the additional funds required to complete this project in full. And I would like to say, Council's committed to it. And to be fair, I know that Councillor Townsend has put a motion, wants to put an amendment to this to basically take out Anthony Higginbotham, the former MP's name, from the motion. But I just think a little bit of credit where credit's due. And tongue-in-cheek back, Mark, I might have been in Blackburn, but I got selected. So, yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Hosker, will you please second the motion?
I second that motion.
Any member? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor McGowan for bringing this motion to the Council, and Councillor Hosker for seconding that. It is really important, the paddy and flood defences. As you know, a Padiham resident myself, and obviously ward councillor in Gawthorpe, the 2015 Boxing Day floods devastated Padiham, and you know, it had 149 properties affected, businesses and residents, and it's nearly 9 years since those floods. We've had some movement, but ultimately those flood defences still haven't been built, and we're in a position where Padiham residents are still in a situation where they don't know when is this going to happen again. So it is imperative that these flood defences are completed. The money that has already been spent on these flood defences is quite staggering already. But if we don't complete them, then what we've already spent is just a waste. So I do thank Councillor McGowan for bringing this, but I would like to propose the amendment which has already been circulated in your packs. And to be honest, the main reason is really, first of all, to give recognition to all partners that have been involved within the process of raising those funds. Ultimately, some of those partners might be called on again to try and raise the additional funds required. So let's give credit where credit's due to everybody that's been involved. And to be honest, I just want to take the politics out of this. This is too important for Padiham to be playing party politics with it. So on that basis, I move that amendment, and that's the reasons why. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. And can I ask, is that seconded?
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second the amendment.
Thank you. And I realise this has come at a late time. If members wish to adjourn for 10 minutes in order to consider the amendment, would someone move and second that? No? Yeah, I had Councillor Harbour who showed his. You put your hand up. Would you like to speak on this? Okay, that's fine. Right. Any member on this amendment? Councillor Anwar?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, on the amendment, on the motion itself, just to make an observation, really, and I think it's just off the final words that Councillor Lewis just used there were that the Padiham flood defences are much more important than playing politics. It's about the people of Padiham. And we all know, all of us, and especially those of in this chamber that were around when the floods happened, and how devastating it was for the people of Padiham and how it affected their lives. So I think it's important that we don't play politics with this, because the priority is the people of Padiham, and every single one of the group leaders here, following last council's full council, we got together, we met with the Environment Agency, but we also wrote to government and to the Environment Agency saying that we want to make sure that these works are completed for the sake of the people of Padiham. But we also need to recognise over the time since, for the past 7 or 8 years, the efforts actually that the ward councillors, people like Councillor Harbour have put in over that time, but also the efforts of some of our officers, and normally don't make mention of officers by name, but particularly the Chief Exec and the Head of Economy and Growth, Kate Ingram, the efforts that they've gone to actually secure and bring that funding in. And again, putting party politics to the side, whether we like it or not, the former MP did also help to work towards bringing some of that funding and being an advocate for that. So I think it's important to recognise that, but I think what we've got to do is make sure that at the centre of it is that every single person in this chamber works to ensure, and we've already done that by making sure that planning application went through the Development Control Committee, that all of that is in place. So as and when, if and when government make that decision, it's actually the work of every single person in this chamber, it's the work of the people of Padiham, it's the ward councillors, and it's our officers that have delivered that. And I just want that to be noted, to be recognised, that we put that to the side, because the most important thing is not whether we go for an amendment or take somebody's name out or add somebody's name in. It's actually, we're doing this because we want the best for the people of Padiham, and to ensure that this work is completed, and every single one of us in the chamber will do our utmost best to make sure that money comes in and it delivers for the people of Padiham. And the costs have gone up, and the reason for that is one, because of costs of building costs and materials and what have you, but also, let's be honest, costs have gone up because of climate change as well. Those plans that were in place at the time from 4 or 5 years ago. Those defences would not be enough if we had severe floods again. So we need to make sure this work is carried out, but also recognise that climate change is happening as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Does any other member? Councillor Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Mr. Mayor, colleagues are quite right when they talk about trying to take the politics out of it, and what we're about is actually what benefits the people of Padiham. But I also think it's important as well that whenever motions do come forward, that they are factually correct. because we're going to be asked to vote on them. And I think it's important that if we are going to vote on it, whichever way we vote, we just got to make sure that the information's right. And I think one of the reasons why the amendment came forward was that in the original motion from Councillor McGowan, and I appreciate his thoughts behind it, when he just turned around and said that the MP, or the ex-MP, sorry, should have some recognition. I accept that. I accept, because I think, as I understand it, he brought £3 million in at a late stage. But the point I'm making is that on this original motion, it says that he successfully secured 18 million. And he didn't do that. At least £9 million of that money was already secured and in place before he became an MP. So that's why the amendment's there, is just to try and balance things out a little bit. If when we come to the amendment, my colleague wants to put in a line which mentions the 3 million, fair enough. But don't start saying that he secured £18 million, because it's quite simply not true. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harbour. Any other members on this amendment? No? Okay. Councillor Lewis, as mover of the amendment, you have the right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Take on board, you know, everyone's comments, and all I really want to say again is these flood defences are really important, whichever way you look at it. And I do think the council does need to work with everybody, the MP, government, the Environment Agency, just to try and get these flood defences built once and for all, and the people of Padiham can put their mind at rest. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McGowan, as the mover of the original motion, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
No, I'm fine, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to the vote on the amendment, which is, this is the amendment. This council is shocked to secure the additional funds to complete the project in full. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is carried and now becomes the substantive motion. We will now take a vote on the substantive motion, which I've read out already. Yeah?
If does anybody want to speak on the substantive?
Right, okay. Does anybody want to speak on the substantive motion? Nope. Thank you. All those in favour of the substantive motion? Thank you. All those against, please show. No? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. The substantive motion is carried. Agenda item 3C, motion on adaptation of definition of Islamophobia, pages 13 and 14 of the agenda pack. Councillor Anwar, I understand that you wish to alter your motion with the consent of the meeting as provided for in the council procedure 14.7a. Will you confirm your alteration?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would like to move the motion with an alteration to the 5th paragraph by replacing the word cited with partially extracted for a number of reasons. First one being is the whole of that, the words, if they were to be included, is very, very long, but also due to religious sensitivity as well. With regards to, whilst I'm moving this motion, oh, sorry. It's not moving, it's just... Yeah, just moving that, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will members indicate their consent to allow the alteration without discussion by saying aye? Thank you. Any members against? Thank you. Councillor Anwar, will you please move your motion as altered?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move the motion as altered, and I'd just like to say a few things as well. I think every single one of us agrees that Burnley is very rich in its diversity of all the different people that live and call Burnley and Padiham their home. And that is something that I believe, and I'm sure others do as well, is that something should be celebrated. It's something that, especially as a Burnley lad, it's something that I'm really, really proud of. In Burnley, we have a strong history of tackling any form of discrimination, but particularly when it comes to issues around racism. Sadly, we had the incident that took place in Southport where 3 beautiful girls lost their life, and what should have been an occasion or a time where we should have been sharing as a nation in their grief, that moment was hijacked by individuals for their own purposes to try and spread hate and division. And one of the things that happened with that was actually the hate and division that was shared was actually, a lot of it was focused on Islamophobic content being shared about the Muslim community or Muslims right on social media, on various different channels, and that led to fear and hatred, fear and also anxiety within our communities. We had the disturbances that took place up and down the country, and one of the fears was that those disturbances or riots would make their way to Burnley as well. We were working very, very closely, as a number of colleagues in this chamber were, working with colleagues in the police to ensure that we could keep our communities safe. One of the things that happened as part of that was that we had at Burnley Cemetery a number of our Muslim graves in the Muslim section of that were desecrated. But one thing that really made me proud was actually the response from all of our communities off the back of that. I remember going up there and seeing that volunteers from our young volunteers from the local community turned up there, and before the council officers could even get there to clean up the graves, they'd done it themselves. From the local charity, there were people coming up and offering them drinks. And while I was up there, I had a call from Father Alex from the local parish, who rang me up and said, I'd like to come and show and stand in solidarity. And he came and he stood with us and he said a prayer. And that went a long way in sending a message out that that hatred, that division is something that's not welcome in Burnley. And the community's response as well. The community of Burnley actually responded in a way where actually said, we're not going to welcome this, we're not that town anymore. We've learnt our lessons from 20 years ago. And I'd like to say thank you to all of the partners, the police, particularly some of our officers, MJ and Naveed in particular, who worked round the clock to ensure that we kept all of our communities safe. But that week, for us as a town and for Burnley, was actually a test. Because I'd been involved in organisations like building bridges in Burnley for the past 20 years or so, promoting cohesion and ensuring that we unite all of our communities. And often I get people saying, well, what is the point of, you have these interfaith events, what is the point of it? Well, the results spoke for themselves. Because it was relationships. 22 years ago, when Building Bridges was set up, the reason it was set up was because the bishop at the time, when the riots broke out in Burnley in 2001, if he wanted to pick up the phone and speak to a local community leader and an imam from any of the other communities, he did not have the number. He didn't have their contact details. But actually, the test was for us this time. We had those relationships, we had those contacts, we picked up the phone to one another, and every single one of us stood in solidarity. On that day where there potentially could have been something happening in Burnley, there was not a single protester, there wasn't a single counter-protester, and there wasn't a single arrest. What that did was it sent out a message to the rest of the country, to the rest of the county, that Burnley is leading the way on these issues. And this motion is not about causing division or saying anything. This motion is actually about sending a message to the rest of the country that they can take a leaf out of Burnley's book. That we want to take a lead on making sure that it's sending that message that Islamophobia, racism, hatred of any form is not welcome in Burnley. And so what I would like to move is that we actually write to government and we say to government that we would like additional funding that was taken away, has been taken away in recent years around interfaith work, around community cohesion, actually adopting that definition of Islamophobia that was obviously written and put together by the APPG, adopting that, but also then investing in our communities, not just in Burnley, but right across the country and promoting the diversity that exists. And also celebrating actually our diversity as well. So programs like New Neighbours, supporting them, but also I would like to see that Burnley becomes a city of sanctuary, similar to what Lancaster and Preston have done as well. As I said, this motion is not about something that's contentious. It's actually about sending out a message that Burnley is taking the lead. We want every others to follow suit and learn from the great work that's gone on in Burnley. And that is actually down to all of our partners and everybody who's taken part in various different programs and activities over the years. And so I would urge everybody to support this motion and send a clear message to the people of Burnley, the people of Lancashire, but also to the whole country that there's a lot that they can learn from, especially the efforts that we've put in over the past 22 years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Councillor Hurt, will you please second the motion as altered?
I second the motion as altered, Mr. Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Any member? Right, okay. And I've got Councillor Khan, Lubna Khan, and then Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's going to be a hard feat to follow what the leader of the council has said. Very eloquently, he's outlined what all of Burnley feels, regardless of the very few people that are trying to make out that we do not feel this way. The scene and the situation that we all went through was very, very traumatizing, particularly for the elderly community and the younger people of our communities. And what happened as a result of that is that these people all actually came together. When people try to instill fear and make people become further apart, the cleverest amongst us do something which actually makes the exact opposite happen. A group of community members started speaking over social media, and they started explaining how these very few voices do not represent us, and neither does the scene of what's happening in the country represent Burnley. Burnley is not a town that will tremble in fear because people are trying to divide us. And a wonderful, amazing human being came up with an idea of bubbles in the park. And this resonated with myself, one of the councillors that was tagged in it, along with a few other councillors, because what he wanted to do, and this word is magical, celebrate. So celebrate the lives of them young girls, even though they were tragically murdered. They were young children. They were children like we have. And we wanted to remember, this gentleman wanted to remember them in some way. So he wanted to celebrate their life. And he wanted to show the rest of the country that this is actually how we're going to remember them, by blowing bubbles in the park. And this then led on to a bigger and an absolutely phenomenal amount of work organised purely by the community and the park rangers. A few councillors have been very, privileged to be involved. We've tried to help as much as we can, but this has come all from Burnley. And this event will take place on Sunday, the 15th of September at Thompson Park. And it's an event where it's going to be predominantly free, completely free. Free food, free rides, free attractions, free Mendy, free drumming, free everything. All based off Burnley communities pulling together and saying, actually, we are going to stand united and we're going to show the rest of this country that this is how we remember these young girls and this is how we want to be with each other. I would welcome any member in this chamber, thank you. I would welcome any member in this chamber to please try to join in and help, because we have still got a bit of fundraising, a bit of organising left to do, and please spread it far and wide. It is going to be an absolutely fabulous event, and I'd love to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What can I say? I agree with an awful lot that's been said here tonight regarding this. Most of you know I'm a retired police officer. Most of you know that I was involved in the disturbances of 2001. I saw what happened. I was involved in it as a police dog handler, having petrol bombs thrown at me, having cars rolled down hills on fire at me, having street railings cut down, thrown at me as spears. Something I didn't want to return to. The time for that hatred is something that we don't want to return to, full stop, which is something that we shouldn't have to return to. And I can understand exactly where people are coming from with this. There is no place for Muslim hatred in our town, in our country, anywhere in the world. Mr. Mayor, the last few weeks have been really difficult. We found ourselves in a very dark situation where we had to rally together as a town and as a council to prevent history repeating itself here in Burnley. Where others failed, we have prevailed. But through our determination and the unity of this town and this council, I've taken time over the last few weeks since this motion was published to consider the impact of it. I've read the APPG report mentioned, and I've also read the policy exchange reports of this subject. One of whose authors, you may or may not be aware, is Sir Trevor Phillips, who's obviously a renowned broadcaster nowadays. He served as the chair of the London Assembly and is a former head of the Racial Equality Commission and chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Sir John Jenkins was also an author of that report. He's a former British diplomat, ambassador to Syria, Iraq, Libya and Saudi Arabia. It's of note that the report was actually forwarded by Khalid Mahmood, who is now the former Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr. The The second report was actually forwarded by Sir Sajid Javid, who's obviously the former Home Secretary. Both of these reports came to the same conclusion, that this particular definition should not be adopted. We must remember that we don't live in a totalitarian state where we are governed by an oppressive societal system which maintains complete control, similar to Orwell's nightmare vision of the future in his novel 1984. We live in a nation that is fair and respectful to all. I don't want to see division or the introduction of laws that are religiously based and all our police forced to enforce them. This country removed the blasphemy laws a number of years ago. In my view, this motion is a balkanisation of Britain. It's a balkanisation of the historic policy of the English Crown and of our Parliament. It will probably reverse the greatest achievement of government, which is a proper equality before the law. Because equality before the law is an absolute basic thing, and that is to challenge Mr. Mayor. This motion, it seems to me, challenges everything that we are, everything that we've become, everything that we ought to be. As Friedrich Hayek said, and I'm going to quote him, law must be general, it must be known and certain, and apply equally to all. I put to you now that this motion is the reverse of that. It does not apply equally, it is not general, and it is uncertain. It seems to me it's applying a certain privilege to people. I don't agree with that. We're all the same people. We don't live in Orwell's vision of the future, where words shift their meanings. Although I am sure it's well-intentioned that this motion, I don't feel it's going to ensure unity in our town or in our nation. In fact, quite the opposite. I believe it could have the opportunity to actually sow division here. As I've said, I've thought long and hard about this. There's much I agree with. Muslim hatred is something that we cannot, will not, can never accept. I've seen firsthand that over many years, and especially in 2001. I remember when it came to Burnley, my friend was the landlord of the Duke of York at the time. To have the conversations I had with him the day before that happened here, when he was scared for his family, and to see that part of town torn apart, and then to see how this town came together afterwards. And we did come together afterwards to stop this from ever happening again. Although I can see where you're coming from with this, the actual law itself has to be equal. I'm very sorry, but I cannot support the APPG motion to put it into definition. I do apologise for that, but that is genuinely how I feel after the research that I've carried out into it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. And Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to speak long on this, but given I take the same approach as Councillor Whittaker, I thought it at least right to put on record why. Look, I've always taken the view that we should treat each other with mutual respect. That's something that has been instilled in me since childhood. And like many in this room, I grew up understanding the problems that hatred towards others brings. That shaped me into the person I am today. I'm proud to be from Burnley, regardless of what's happened, because we are not that place any longer. I always try and be polite, empathetic to the views and feelings of others, and I understand the points put forward very well by the council leader and Councillor Khan. I'm always curious to learn about differences too. Hatred is a heavy burden to carry though, and to me there's no place for it anywhere. That includes anti-Muslim hatred, which is what I think the council leader is trying to address with this motion. Now, if I'm being asked to condemn hatred of any kind, including anti-Muslim hatred, then I will do it. But what I cannot do is agree to a motion which singles out a certain section of our town for their religious beliefs and says that any criticism should be curtailed. Islam is a religious belief, but to dislike it is not, as the motion says, rooted in racism, because there is no race involved in Islam. As my council colleagues would agree, anybody can become a Muslim regardless of race. And it's for that reason that I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And just bear with me. I've got a couple of people. Councillor Gordon Lishman, and then I've got Councillor Kazmi, and then Councillor Hosker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do actually have a little sympathy with what both Councillor McGowan and Councillor Whittaker have just said. The tension between individual and personal human rights and group rights is a difficult one, which was carried through in a lengthy argument about genocide and individual human rights, particularly after the Second World War. The answers that emerged from that debate are ones that say that you need to respond to both, and where inequality for individuals or discrimination against or hatred of individuals arises from a specific shared characteristic, then that needs to be addressed in relation to that group. The argument about everybody being equal and so on reminds me of a classic Martin Luther King comment, which is, the law cannot be used to change hearts and minds, but it can restrain the heartless. And that's the direction in which equality laws in this country, which I helped frame, and in other countries, including South Africa, that's the direction in which that debate has gone. The direction of recognising that the denial of individual rights can arise from membership of a particular group. The thing which is new in this process, in its extent, is the tide of vicious disinformation that takes off and is repeated time and time again. And when you feel the need to answer those things, you feel you need some facts. The problem is that that tide of disinformation and viciousness has already taken off and disseminated itself before you've got time to find the facts and come to terms with them. What we saw in social media posting here and in other places over this was a series of assertions which deliberately confused legal and illegal immigration, and indeed which confused that with the presence in this country of the children and grandchildren of people who had been immigrants. I should perhaps apologise to some for having brought an immigrant into Burnley by marrying her. Why is that funny? Because that's what we're talking about. Those are the people we're talking about. They're people like us. They are all of us. And when you say ludicrous generalised assertions not supported by fact about people being, quote, put up in hotels, given first-class medical care, or put at the top of housing lists, that demonstrates a level of ignorance on the reality of all those subjects and what is happening that needs to be stopped at the point it happens, and responding to what happens and what is said about individuals is part of doing that. I have a little concern about the odd word in this motion. I very, very much respect the Leader of the Council's work on interfaith work, but it doesn't speak to or for me. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Jew. I have great trouble with this very idea of faith. I think that the majority of Burnley's residents, who I represent in this, because they share my lack of faith, need to have a level of engagement in this debate that enables all of us to share in the importance, back to Councillor Whittaker's point, of our shared humanity that goes across different groups. I think the importance is in not so much interfaith, but in community, and not in separate communities coming together, but in a single shared community, which is about humanity. one of the things that's concerned me, not just in this country but in others, in some of these debates, has been the insistence that Muslims have to be represented by people of religion. They don't. They have to be represented by people who happen to be Muslim. If you're a parent, if you're a member of this local authority, if you're a worker, if you're a business person, if you're anything, what's important is your relationship with other humans and other people. And the question, the challenge for us is how we mix people of all faiths and none, and all backgrounds, in a way that emphasizes that shared approach. So the challenge for us is not just how we look at particular categories and how we work with them, although many of those categories do need to be supported. It's also about how we break down those barriers. And the challenge, it seems to me, for us in addressing a number of these things is we are talking about people who happen to be Muslim, but who, much more importantly, are people whose identities in life go far beyond anything to do with a religion, a belief, a job, a place of living, or anything else. And until you can break down those sorts of ideas that categorize and identify and put people in boxes, you will fail to create a world in which all of us can celebrate our shared humanity. And that, it seems, Mr. Mayor, is the challenge for us.
Thank you, Councillor Lishman. Councillor Kazmi.
As an individual living in Burnley and being part of the kind of disturbances, I do share Afrasiab's and Lubna's kind of point with regards to that Muslims have been put in the spotlight with regards to this kind of like situation and the disturbances that have kind of occurred. But I would also like to stress the importance that Borough, the Burnley of Borough, is a diverse community, and we have so many different communities with different backgrounds. And as a councillor and as an individual, it's so important to reduce adversity and to increase diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. I had Councillor Hosker. Okay, Councillor Hosker's declined. Councillor Khan, Lubna Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to pick on a few points.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend and Chief Executive. That is correct. You cannot speak twice on an amendment, on a motion. Sorry, on a motion, you can't speak twice. I do apologise. Yeah. Okay. And any other member apart from Lubna Khan? And Councillor Christine Solis, and then I've got Councillor Lewis. Did anybody raise a hand here? No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just need to let everyone know in the chamber that the interfaith work that began in 2001 primarily started bringing the Muslim and Christian communities together. It's gone on from there, and within our organisation we have what is known as Faith Friends. I'm one of those people, and what we do, we go into schools, both primary, secondary and college. And what's happened now, with the diverse ethnicity and faith that we have in all those areas these days, we work with everyone. It's widened. We work with people with no faith at all as well. So if I can just say that if I was in a secondary school here in Burnley, for example, Blessed Trinity, the different nationalities within that school that we spend time with is far and wide now. Not only have we got the faith that I mentioned, which is Christian and Muslim, we've also got the Eastern Europeans, We've got Asian people far and wide, as far as China and so on. So the interfaith started because of the riots, and at that time where the Muslims, the Asian and the white community were against one another. The wonderful work in interfaith now deals with every nationality that we have in our town, and I'd like to say that someone that works with building bridges, I want you all to know that, and I'm proud to be a part of that because of who we reach now, which is literally everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Solis. And Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to speak too much on this, to be honest with you. I just want to sort of put a little bit of a view across. I understand to some extent where Councillor Whittaker was coming from in terms of, but I don't think this motion curtails anybody's views or their rights to an opinion, as it were. It merely defines what we say Islamophobia is. And if we want to try and tackle Islamophobia in our borough, in the wider community, beyond our borough, then we need to know what we're tackling. You can't, if we're all in debate, was that Islamophobic or was it not Islamophobic? How can you begin to tackle Islamophobia? It's not possible. So to define it, I think, is important. And so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Any other member? No, you can't, Councillor Khan. Right, okay. So I am now, oh, sorry, Councillor Anwar, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to say a few words just on obviously listening to the debate, and I think obviously I understand where certain colleagues have come from with regards to obviously the definition itself or looking at the words, but I think the focus here is what Councillor Lewis just eloquently put there is in terms of what is Islamophobia? We need a definition for it, and actually what does it feel like for those people who, and let's be honest, over the past few weeks we've seen some of the things on Twitter. The hatred that's been shared has been Islamophobic. But I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of what Islamophobia feels like. Islamophobia is when a 4-year-old girl is telling her dad she doesn't want to go to her gym, his gym, because the LED are coming, because of what's being shared. Islamophobia is when a shopkeeper, a Muslim shopkeeper, is ringing you up and saying, I don't want to open my shop just in case something happens and I'm targeted for being Muslim. Islamophobia is when people are attacked in a hotel because of their perceived Muslimness. Linking back to what Councillor Solis said, when the MEN attack took place at the Ariana Grande at the concert there, we had young people from 2 of our schools in Burnley. One was a Christian school, one was a community school. 15 children, year 8s, from both of those schools in one room in Burnley Youth Theatre. The attack had took place the night before, and the following morning we had that group of young people together. And we had a project planned with them. We were going to do some work with them. And I turned around to the practitioners and I said, you know what, we need to discuss what happened yesterday. So I said to the young people, I said, what I want you all to do is, do you want to share what your thoughts are, what your fears are, what you're thinking right now based on what happened in Manchester? Because Manchester's our city. It's where we go for shopping, it's where we go for leisure, it's where, you know, some people will go for football. But the response that we had, all the children, all the young people sat there in silence. So instead, I said to them, write down on a piece of paper how you're feeling right now. They took the piece of paper, folded it open, we picked them out. Every single one of those young people put down a response. And those who were Christian, they were putting things like, oh, I heard somebody make a comment in school and they got in trouble. Or I know somebody who was in the arena. I know somebody who was there at the night, or something happened. Every single one of the Muslim children when we opened it up, wrote down, now everybody's going to think I'm a terrorist. That is the reality of what Islamophobia is. We need to have a definition of it. It's not about the playing about with the words, about what racism is or how you define it. Until we have that starting point, what we're saying as part of this motion is we're writing to government to say we need investment in these programs, we need investment in these projects, we need to have and adopt this definition so that we can start to move forward. As I said before, we have an opportunity. We led the way in our response. Burnley has the opportunity to lead the way again. And so what I ask you all to do in this chamber, it's not about which bits of it you like or which you feel comfortable with. It's about actually how do we make that step forward? And it's about all forms of hatred, all the covenants that we have. When we stand at Holocaust Memorial or when we stand at Remembrance Day, it's recognising that actually we stand against all forms of hatred. So I urge you all colleagues, to support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. Excuse me. We'll now move to the vote on the motion as altered. And all those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion as altered is carried. Item number 3D on the motion. Item number 3D, motion on winter fuel payments on pages 15 and 16 of your agenda pack. Councillor Whitaker, will you please move your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move my motion. Before I do so, I just want to say the reason why I brought this motion before this full council, before anybody says it's politically based or anything like that, it certainly is not. The reason why I brought it is I've a number of people that I know that are going to be seriously affected by it. Not only a number of people that I know, but I've also been collared by quite a few residents in the area where I live in Whitfield and Ironhill, who are super concerned about what this recent announcement from the government. It is going to have a massive detrimental effect on a lot of people here in Burnley. With the Chancellor of the Exchequer's announcement to cut the winter fuel payment this winter, with, let's be honest, there's been virtually no notice of it. There's been no compensation measures pointed to protect poor and vulnerable pensioners. I think it's the wrong policy. As a result of this announcement, there's going to be millions of pensioners up and down the country that are going to struggle this winter, but not just up and down the country. There are going to be pensioners here in Burnley that rely on this winter fuel payment. I did some research into this, obviously, and I asked council officers how many people is this going to affect. They've told me that the Lancashire Telegraph found that 15,524 people currently in Burnley are eligible for winter fuel payments. But with the new government's changes, this number apparently is going to drop to 2,387. That's an 84.6% of people, pensioners in this borough, that will lose that winter fuel payment. There's loads of charities out there. I've quoted one of these in this actual motion itself, Age UK, that says that 2 million people now will be put in dire straits as a result of this policy that's been brought into place by the Chancellor. 2 million people. Many pensioners here in Burnley now will be paying, they're going to have to find money to pay these energy bills, and it's going to be a real stretch for them. It's not just going to be a case of, well, we can't really afford it. It is going to be a case of either heating a house or eating or not heating a house and eating, or eating and not heating, one or the other. People on low incomes, are going to miss out on pension credit. Now, when we talk about people on pension credit, we're looking at somebody that's on basically £218 a week. If you're just slightly above that £218 a week, you're not entitled to that pension credit as an individual. If you're a couple, you know, you've got a small private pension. Again, you're going to miss out on it. By literally a couple of pounds it takes you over that, you're going to miss out on these winter fuel payments. And you know, well, sorry, yeah, we know what I'm talking about here, Councillor. I do apologise. I'm still a little bit het up about the previous debates. I'm not reading this verbatim as I ought to be doing. I want to basically ask that this council deserve more. They deserve to live in dignity and financial security, and that this council believes that the government has set in place a threshold which pensioners do not qualify for winter fuel payments is far too low. Only those receiving the pension of less than £218 and £15 a week, £332 and £95 a week for couples are eligible for pension credits. This council believes that the government should halt the proposed change to the winter fuel payment and reconsider. Burnley Council, I am asking, therefore, resolve to instruct the council leader and the chief executive to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer calling for the policy on linking winter fuel payments to pension credit receipt to be immediately paused and introduce a new threshold to determine eligibility for winter fuel payments. Burnley Council also requests that the council leader and the chief executive write to Burnley's Member of Parliament, Mr Ryan, who was here earlier, asking him to give his formal support to halting the changes to the winter fuel payment eligibility. Request all group leaders within Burnley Council to sign a joint letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer calling for the new winter fuel payment policy to be suspended and reviewed. I'd also ask that we urgently commence a significant awareness campaign to maximise uptake of pension credits. This will include the use of the council notice boards, social media, promotional aspects in the local press, and a targeted letter to those who may be eligible. There's a lot of people out there in Burnley that are entitled to pension credit that this is going to affect, and they don't currently claim it. It's our responsibility, I believe, as a council to make as many people aware of this as possible. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Councillor Emo, will you please second that motion?
Mr Mayor, I second that motion.
Thank you. Any member on this motion? I've got Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I, first of all, thank the Prime Minister for today commenting on this matter, so I had the most up-to-date material to work with, who said, "I didn't want to means test the winter fuel payment, but it was a choice we had to take, a choice to protect the most vulnerable pensioners while doing what is necessary to repair the public finances. Because pensioners deserve a functioning NHS, good public transport and strong national infrastructure. They want their children to be able to buy homes. They want their grandchildren to get a good education. So we have made the difficult decision to mend the public finances so everyone benefits in the long term, including pensioners." So that's what Keir Starmer has said today, but I'll tell you what I want to say today. At 2.7 trillion, the UK government debt is the highest since 1962. At least in 1962, we had something to show for it, in the wake of the birth of our NHS and quite literally rebuilding a post-war Britain. I do agree the take-up of pension credit is too low, and that's why our Labour government have already launched a campaign to raise awareness and support to those who are entitled to claim. Now, you mentioned virtually no notice and no compensatory measures. That reminds me of another group, the 3.8 million WASPy women affected by the 1995 Conservative government's State Pension Act, some of which were affected for a second time when in 2011, further increases to state pension age were brought in faster than the coalition had promised. But I must wonder, where was this compassion when the two-child limit was introduced 7 years ago? That's 4.3 million children now living in poverty. 100,000 more than last year. And the health and social impact of their experience will follow them for decades to come. Where was this compassion when funding for the housing regeneration schemes was stripped from us, which would have created healthier homes and reduced energy costs for our most deprived communities? And where was this compassion when COVID-positive patients were being placed in care homes with vulnerable and elderly residents in spring 2020, while the Conservative government held parties and schemed to allow friends and family to bypass ethical procurement procedures to scam us of our hard-earned tax contribution? As elected members, we all know difficult decisions must be made. Many members here were involved in making those choices locally, as Burnley Council's budgets were decimated. In a fair and just world, every member of our society would have an income that allowed them to live happy, healthy lives. The successive failures of 5 Prime Ministers from the Conservative Party mean that is a long way from happening. I'm afraid, as much as it would be lovely for everyone to have the benefits at this moment in time, difficult decisions simply have to be made because we have no other choice.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Can I just say, so far we've had a lovely meeting, a lovely discussion, and so please can we keep the interruptions to a minimum, and let's give every member the respect by hearing what they're saying. We might not agree, but we have to hear them in this chamber. So, saying that, Councillor Khan, and then I've got Councillor Graham, Councillor Birtwistle and Councillor Hurt. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not really sure I want to follow that, to be honest with you. I would just like to add a couple of things. This evening, Councillor Whittaker has been very emotional, and it's really come across this chamber how heartfelt he feels about what he's been discussing tonight. We can all resonate with, you know, how much empathy we have for him and his experiences, but also for the motion that he's put through. I do think, to be honest with you, that a lot of what Councillor Barton has said does make a lot of sense. I look forward to seeing what the people's responses are. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I will look forward to the day when we have a really good PA system in this chamber, because this one isn't really fit for purpose. I was a bit thrown aback by what Councillor Barton said, because she was so passionate in what she said, and I agreed with every single word she did. When Councillor Whittaker introduced this motion, he talked about people in Whittlefield and Iton Hill, you know, who are missing out on the winter fuel payments. I am as well. I'm one of those people affected. But I spoke to someone in Whittlefield with Iton Hill when we were doing our election campaign, and he lost 25% of his pension savings in one day. And it was when Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng made that appalling unfunded budgets. 25% of the money that he'd saved up for a pension to allow him to retire in his early 60s was wiped out in one day. So whether you agree or not with what Councillor Whittaker said, there have been far more dramatic impacts by the last 14 years of Tory government than this one measure that's happened this year. I do hope that we will, all of us as councillors, lobby for people to take advantage of pension credits, people that are due pension credits. And I honestly believe that there will be something done to adjust to the level of pension credits as well, because it is true that the level is drawn too low, and there will be people who will suffer from the loss of this winter fuel payment. But I do not support the motion requesting lobbying of the government to restore the winter fuel payment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Birtwistle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What staggers me about all this was the speed it was done. Within 4 weeks of being made the Chancellor, 4 weeks where they haven't even had time to look at the books, didn't know what was going on, the Chancellor, the then Chancellor, the Chancellor now, decides to pick on the pensioners. What have the pensioners done? She takes the winter fuel allowance off the pensioners. If they need the money, that's fine, no problem. The pensioners will have to suffer. But what she did with the pension money she's taken off, she gave it to the train drivers. Now, the train drivers are on 69 grand a year. So why does she want to take £300 a year off me and hand them to the train drivers? That's the issue here. It's what they've done with the money. I accept what's been said, but it's the fact that the money has not been spent on what it really needs to be spent on. I don't need my winter fuel allowance, I'll admit that. And I will be happy to forgo my winter fuel allowance if it was given to the starving children that we have in this country, not to train drivers on £69,000 a year. That's what I would be happy for my winter fuel allowance to go on. And the majority of the people who claim benefits or are nearly on the benefit, or just above the benefits, started work some 50, 60 years ago when salaries were a pittance, private pensions didn't exist, and nobody could afford to save up. I remember those days. I was brought up in a two-up, two-down, rat-infested slum. My first salary was £2.3 and 9. My wage when I was 21 was £19.7 and 9. And I was expected then to save up for my future. I couldn't save up for my future. Fortunately, I managed to do it in later life. But a lot of people weren't as advantaged as I was, who managed to get on as I have. A lot of people fell by the wayside, and they need this money. It's no good saying, what's £200, what's £300? It is needed, it is needed. But it's not just the winter fuel allowance that's gone. Also, the cost of the heating's gone up £150. So not only are the pensioners losing £200 or £300, if they're over 80 like me, they're losing £500 for this. And the fact that the decision was made within 4 weeks of being elected, so it must have been in the mind of the government when they were campaigning for this election. They never said once they would take the winter fuel allowance off the pensioners, never once. Yet in 4 weeks, they made the decision. Nobody in government makes that decision. There was never a meeting held by the government to make this decision. So they knew what they were going to do. That is the backhanded slap that the pensioners of this town have received from this Labour Chancellor. It's an absolute outrage, and it should be changed now, and they should be given that money back. At least they can look at it again and make some decisions on that. But to make a decision so quickly without a discussion within government, because it was so quick done, and the money has been handed to the train drivers to call off the strikes, who were on 69,000 a year, is an absolute outrage when some of our pensioners will be struggling this winter. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Birtwistle. I've got Councillor Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I don't disagree with the sentiment of the motion, I've got to comment on what feels like an opportunistic and hypocritical nature of it. The Conservative government equally share responsibility for the current situation with the totally inept handling of the country's finances. This motion, well, although Councillor Whittaker has said it's not done in this way, but it feels like it's there to garner a few likes on social media, some outrage if people vote against it. But it totally ignores the effects on the economy of Brexit, the disastrous financial policies of Liz Truss, and much, much more of the Conservative government's financial mismanagement of this country into account. But saying that, Labour definitely aren't innocent in the decision either. The alleged financial black hole had been publicised months before the general election, but ignored by mainstream media and political parties. But even so, as Councillor Barton alluded to, there was a choice that had been made. And that was to continue with the austerity, hitting the elderly, taking out the winter fuel allowance. Then next, we're going to be looking at them coming after the disabled and then the poorest in society, while they constantly protect the multimillionaires who could easily shoulder the burden of a modest wealth tax to pay for the winter fuel allowance and lifting the two-child benefit cap, or explore other funding options. And as I understand it, the Chancellor hasn't even bothered to carry out an impact assessment, which is absolutely unforgivable. The decision to cut the allowance of many pensioners whose income is only slightly above the threshold of pension credit just before winter is absolutely immoral. And I just want to give a story on this. But there's somebody that I know in their mid-80s. They're not well off. Most of their pension is taken up by their rent and their council tax. They're just slightly above the pension credit limit, but they rely every year on the winter fuel allowance. This year, they're already having to put, at this time of year, the heating on and put the thickest quilt on the bed because they feel cold because of their health conditions and their age. That's only going to get worse for them. In a way, they're lucky. I've helped them by finding ways of saving them money on their energy bills, by getting them on the cheapest possible payments, much below the price cap. But that's not guaranteed to last over winter. So they are going to rely on help from other people that they know who themselves can't afford to have the heating on over winter to keep them warm. And how anybody can defend this change at this time, right before winter, I just can't put into words. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hurt. And I've got Councillor Hosker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, disappoints me. I mean, Conservatives getting beat, they deserve everything they got in general election. The MPs deserved everything they got that's come from a Conservative. And they paid the price for making mistakes. I've said it openly, it's no secret, I didn't like what they did. And I'm one of them against them. They deserved everything. If they got punished for it, and they got punished for it, Labour Party would be done. They'll pay the price. And you, yourselves, will pay the price as well. What you've done from day one, you've turned around and told the pensioners, we're not going to increase tax. We're not going to, and even Keir Starmer himself went on video and criticised the Tories taking all this money off. Well, we're going to take this off. And then as soon as he gets in power, he takes it off. And on top of that now, you're taking the bus passes off them. You're going to cut the prescription charges from how it's 6-year-old, now you get free prescriptions, it's going to be 66. It's like you've gone all out war on the pensioners, to me. That's what it feels like. Have you ever been in somebody's house, a pensioner? I've been into a lot of pensioners' houses. People that are struggling to make a do. And when you see a lady at 90 years old, and the only thing she's got around is a cardigan to keep her warm and a blanket. I'm not on about your well-off areas now, what are struggling. I'm on about your bad areas, your rundown areas. People that are proper struggling with one bar on the fire to keep warm. That's what I'm on about. And your Labour Party should be ashamed of themselves. It's disgusting.
Thank you, Councillor Hosker. And Councillor Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to say a couple of things. I think that some of the examples that were given, Councillor Barton, gave a fantastic speech about all the things that have been taken away by the previous government. But the point I want to make is that just because we can cite examples of things that are far worse doesn't make this right. And what we've got to look at is the facts. In the build-up to the election, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said that winter fuel payments would not get scrapped. he said, he committed to that our bills would not go up. But the fact of the matter is that he's gone against that. And what we're seeing is and one of the examples I remember watching was that an interview that he gave was with a resident in Wakefield, I think, and he said he visited this pensioner and she was sat in her house and she had to have similar to what we said, wearing a cardigan in the house just to keep warm so she wouldn't have to turn the heating on. That was in the run-up to the election. And the promise was that these fuel bills, these energy companies would be held to account. There's a better way of dealing with this, that's actually by taxing the rich. Those big corporations, and holding Ofgem to account, making sure that actually they're not fit for purpose at the moment. And that's where already this government is failing. And I think what we need to do is look at the question in hand. Is it fair that the most vulnerable in society are the ones being targeted by this? And also listen to the financial expert Martin Lewis, who's also saying that the government, and particularly the Chancellor, needs to look at this decision again. So let's look at the facts. We can talk about what about. Look at the facts here. What did the government say when they were trying to get elected? What did they say that they would do? There was mention there about the two-child cap. The government decided that they would withdraw the whip against anybody who voted against them on that. So I think we need to focus on, stop using examples of what other things, look at the facts of what was promised during the election and actually what's going on now. I don't think anybody, I think Councillor Hurt put it so eloquently, anybody who can stand here and say that that is acceptable what's happening. Tax the rich, tax the corporations like you said you would do during that election campaign. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar. I've got Councillor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As members will know, I don't really speak on national issues when these motions have been brought forward, but I have to say, given that 15,000 pensioners in Burnley and Padiham, Hapton are going to be impacted, I think that Councillor Whittaker does right in bringing this up. And it is a shame that the MP did come for the start of this meeting but has left, because he'd get the strength of feeling that we've got here. Councillor Barton, I always like a debate with you, Councillor Barton. There were a lot of whataboutery in what you said, but I think you did make a good point when you said that Keir Starmer made a choice, and he made a choice between this or inflation busting pay rises to union barons. And we saw where he went on it, and with the current MP that we've got, I mean, £20,000 were donated to him during his campaign, so I hardly think that even with a letter to him, he's going to be fat in the corner trying to get this decision, which I think we all agree is a bad call. I hardly think he's going to try and get it reversed. I just can't see that happening. A few things that stick with me really. The Chancellor never did an impact assessment on this. There were nothing. The speed at which it was done again was just. It's been mentioned previously. It was just. It's an attack on pensioners, and it's not the first attack that is on pensioners. There will be more. I've said this to a number of residents that have spoken to me about this. I try not to delve into the national political he said, she said, and this is why I don't really talk on these motions when they're brought to full council. But the things that I'm saying to people on the door is just brace yourself, because that's what's coming now. We've already seen the groundwork laid with today's speech by the Prime Minister that it's going to be a painful budget. And I expect it will be. But to lay the blame at the previous government and they left us in this state and that state. I mean, we're not talking about 2010 here. We're not talking about a paper with no money left. We're talking about coming out of a pandemic where we supported businesses across this town, where we helped people with furlough and grants. And yes, that has increased the debt. But the idea that we are bankrupt essentially it's too much. It's not actually the case, and there are political choices being taken. And I just wanted to put it on record that I think Councillor Whittaker's right to bring this up, because if it were a political decision I had to take, then I wouldn't be going after pensioners first and foremost. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McGowan. I've got Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to reply to a couple of things that I've just said, and I'll start with Councillor Anwar, and he's right, really, in terms of some of the terms in terms of whataboutery and just comparisons and things like that. But what he didn't take into account, and he says everybody knew this before the election, That's not quite true. I didn't interrupt you for 5 minutes when you were speaking, so please don't interrupt me. So, just a few weeks ago, when Rachel Reeves stood up, the Chancellor, she did say there was a £22 billion black hole. Now, people will say, oh yeah, she would say that, wouldn't she? But ultimately, the Office for Budget Responsibility had some serious questions to ask about that as well. And they've opened an investigation into why, basically, they were not told about this when the Conservatives were in charge, in terms of why that black hole was not there. And they've opened up an inquiry. So I don't think it's quite as cut and dried as what Councillor Anwar says. In terms of looking at other things, in terms of, there was COVID, there was the war in Ukraine, there was one thing and another. What I will say to the Tories is, at least we left a note saying there was no money left. You guys just did a runner and left £22 billion black hole. You didn't even have the decency to leave a note to tell us what the current situation was. And I'll wrap up here with basically Councillor Birtwistle, who always comes in here like nothing was ever to do with him in the past. And he never had to make any tough choices when he was the MP for this town and in government, and did pick up from that point in 2010 when Labour had to rescue the economy, had to bail out the banks, basically to the tune of a lot more money than went into COVID and Ukraine. Basically, if you'd have gone to cash machines and there wouldn't have been any cash in those days, so what Gordon Brown and the Chancellors did was absolutely right in saving the economy. And okay, we did have to pay for it later, but ultimately it was the right decision to make. But you made some choices, Councillor Birtwistle, I remember, in 2010, 2011. Don't interrupt me, I didn't interrupt you. You decided to take it from children living in poverty. The bedroom cap, freezing benefits for a number of years. So you're on record as basically doing similar things. And those living in squalor, you're endlessly now coming to this council, basically saying there should be more money spent on replacing damp, mouldy conditions, things like that. And you're absolutely right now. But you weren't saying that in 2010 and 2011 when you took £15 million a year from this town to redevelop our neighbourhoods. Your fingerprints were all over it. And you also, your ultimate prize was taking it from the students. Remember signing that note? We won't triple student loans. The first thing you did when you got into power, you did. So you've got a track record. Don't come in here lecturing anybody else. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Can I remind members? Please, can you let the member who's speaking to say without interrupting, please? And I think, and we've had a good meeting so far, and I think this is an item where everybody wants to talk about it. It's quite emotive. I've still got a few speakers, but please, if you could take less than 5 minutes. People have gone over. I've let it go because I thought it's quite a good debate here. But please try to keep it within 5 minutes, and please give the respect and listen to the people. I've got Councillor Haig, and then Councillor Lorna, and then Councillor Lishman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Townsend kind of stole my thunder there. And I was going to say that there are many in this chamber who have very short memories, because some of us were young enough to cast our first vote in 2010 as a student on the promise that I would not pay triple my university fees. I now pay hundreds out of my salary every single month, but still owe £9,000 more than I did 4 years ago. So I think that there's a bit of hypocrisy in it's okay to take money and make financial decisions that impact people when it isn't affecting themselves. Equally, last year, my mortgage doubled. I am paying out an extra £400 a month on my mortgage, in addition to the hundreds that I pay in my student loans. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy. Nobody wants to take these decisions. It's not going to be any surprise that I cannot support this motion. But I think that those who have perhaps impacted the youngest generation quite substantially in the last few years should not make any judgment on what this current government has to do when there is no money left.
Thank you, Councillor Haig. I've got Councillor Lorna and then Councillor Lishman.
Bringing it back to this motion, the impact of this will be a huge hole in the NHS. Again, A&E times will go up. The money spent by saving money by not giving the winter fuel allowance will just go on COVID wards and people not being able to look after themselves and being in Blackburn Hospital. I spent the last week there with relatives and they are still struggling. So I will be supporting Councillor Whittaker's motion because this is just fake money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to start until I was heckled by other members of my family around me by making a bit of an apology. There are times when I do feel a little inclined to lecture the council, and this has been commented on. However, when you talk about a subject like human rights, with which I've been personally involved for the last 25 years, it's a bit difficult not to. On this subject, I started the first campaigns on hypothermia over 50 years ago. I spent 18 years chairing a Department for Work and Pensions group on the failures of take-up, including in a variety of forms of pensions. And I worked closely with ministers from 3 different political parties, pensions ministers, on the structure of the pension scheme and how to change it. And in that context, I just want to make a few background points in the hope that some of it may stick in future debates. I've heard about the cliff edge and the thresholds in relation to pension credit. Absolutely right. One alternative cliff edge would be to use tax rates. An alternative cliff edge, where I have even more sympathy, which was Martin Lewis's proposal, was that the threshold should be linked to council tax bands. The problem is that you're basing your pension system on a cliff edge series. And what you're talking about, and what the motion is actually talking about, is choosing which cliff edge you want to use. And there are always going to be people just above and just below that. And particularly when they're very small sums of money, as with pension credit, there are going to be significant problems with how you manage around that, which is where the numbers from my former organisation, recently quoted, have come from. The challenge is how to create a system which does not have those problems built in. Pension credit, everybody taken for granted and talking about, short-term fix by Ian McCartney as pensions minister, when he came in and said something has got to be done in the short term immediately about pensioner poverty. And pensioner credit was his short-term fix to try and deal with that. We moved on from there. We found ways of trying to address much, much more important basic poverty issues across the whole of the range of older people. There have been some massive changes in that. The fact that nobody's mentioned them means just how successful and accepted they are. Automatic enrolment in pension schemes has been of immense importance. The reduction in qualifying years for women's pensions has been of immense importance. The most important single area of poverty going back to the early 2000s was of women who hadn't made full contributions. And we changed that in the 2006-2007 changes. The next big change, which was brought in by Steve Webb as Pensions Minister, and fought tooth and nail through the coalition to achieve that, I may say, was the triple lock. And what those things have done have moved income from state pension gradually more and more above the poverty level. When this debate started, the basic pension was below poverty level. It is now significantly over that. The challenge now is how to craft a long-term sustainable system, and we have a more sustainable pension system in this country now than the vast majority of the developed world, which can address some of these details. Getting involved in party political banter about the details and ignoring the basic fact of life for about 13 million of our fellow citizens, including myself, I may say me, achieving a reasonable basic standard is something we are getting some way towards now in this country. It would be much, much, much better if this sort of debate looked at those longer term issues and how to shield older people in the long term from poverty, rather than getting involved in bungs decided on by former chancellors of the Exchequer of different parties in order to win a few votes shortly before an election. That's winter fuel allowance. It's also a Christmas bonus. Those things need to be built into the overall income and an overall settlement on pensions from which everybody benefits. I'm therefore not going to vote for this motion on the grounds that what it is dealing with is a matter of detail, but also on the grounds that after the contribution towards poverty amongst children in particular, and the overwhelming failure of economic management of the last 10 years, I think what is required from the current opposition is a much justified period of humility.
Thank you, Councillor Ishman. Oh, any other member? And Councillor Brindle?
This at a slightly different angle. I've listened to everybody's views, both sides of the debate. I want to come at it from the point of view that for many years, I was a civil servant, I was a pensions training officer, and went through all the changes, all the schemes from both right and left governments. And as a civil servant, you don't take a view, you do what the latest circular tells you to do. I can go back to the late 70s, and for all those that are receiving a retirement pension in this chamber, you will be notified each year what your entitlement is. How many can remember graduated retirement benefit, which was brought in as a form of taxation, where for every £7, 10 shillings a man paid, he got an extra old 6p on his pension. For women, they had to pay £9 to get 6p. Not even fair. A lot of women depended on their husbands for their pensions, the old Topney stamp as it used to be called, then the Fortney stamp. We've had additional components. We've had that many different schemes, and the additional component one was brilliant until somebody worked out that by the time you retired, your retirement pension was going to be nearly double what your wage was. So it wasn't going to work. So that was frozen, like grad, like everything else. So when we look at pensions today, and we look at private pensions, the gold-plated final salary schemes, there are a lot of pensioners who are very wealthy, who are very well off, who can retire after doing 40 years in a public sector job and be guaranteed 50% of their best salary in the last 3 years. That's the scheme that ran until just a couple of years ago. Most people here have spoken about poor pensioners, the ones just above pension credit level. And I do wholeheartedly agree that those are the people that are going to suffer the most when they lose their pensions. We also have to look at the people that are also above that level, who are young people with children, who aren't entitled to benefits, who also will not get
that additional amount. So we need to take an overall view of the way we're going. But to finish on a personal point, I did get till this year the winter fuel allowance, but this year I didn't get it. So I queried why. And it was apparent that the DWP had made a mistake. They'd paid my husband, who is 83, £600 for his age, and because he lived on his own. You know, what happened to me? So I rang the DWP and said, this is an error. Yes, they looked at it. They'd got my address as the Marsden Building Society on St James's Street, which was where my pension is paid. They apologised for the error, treated it as an overpayment for my husband, and sent me £250. I don't need that. And like a lot of other people in this chamber, some will need it, some won't. But are we really looking at self-greed for a lot of pensioners? Are we looking at me first? I'm going to give my £250 to a charity. We need to think where we are going when we look at this motion and think about, one, the people that will be affected most, that's the people just above the level, and then the people who are maybe in some cases millionaires and will still be entitled to getting this. I'm putting this purely as a view from my working experience of being behind that counter at Bron House, dealing with people, not taking a view on any particular government, only from the working practice and my experience. But think very, very hard before you jump one way or the other of what this actually means as a knock-on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And any other members? No, brilliant. And that was quite a comprehensive debate, and quite enjoyed it. And I think people on both sides of the argument raise their points quite clearly. And right, so we'll move to a sorry. I have missed that. Councillor Whittaker, would you like to exercise your right to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try to be as brief as possible with this. I am really, really glad that we've had the debate about this tonight. There's been some really good points raised. There's been some great points raised. I like what you just said there, Councillor Brindle. You know, the people that would have been most affected by this are the people that are just above that limit. And yeah, there may be 1 or 2 millionaires, probably not in Burnley, that won't be affected by it because, hey, they don't need that money, do they? But the vast majority of people that are just above the limit do. I thank you for that comment. I'd also like to just remind members, you know, we've had a really good debate over a number of pressing issues this evening that quite a few of us, including myself, feel really quite emotional about. So first of all, thank you everybody that took part in that, and the fact that we've managed to conduct this meeting in the main relatively well, despite some people interrupting, but hey, there we go. Councillor Lishman, as ever, thank you very much for your input there. I've listened amazingly. I've taken on board an awful lot what you've said there, and I really thank you for that. Just going back to it, I'm glad that we've had the debate. It's a real shame that the government has decided to do this, especially when, you know, they are giving people massive pay rises, as people have already said, for train drivers and other people as well. And to target some of the most vulnerable people in our society at this moment in time is, quite frankly, in my opinion, the wrong thing to do. I'm glad that I've raised this motion tonight. I'm glad that we've had the debate, and I would ask everybody in here who generally does feel the same way that I do, that we shouldn't be targeting some of the most vulnerable people in society, that they would vote for this motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for conducting the meeting the way you have done this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. And Thank you. We'll now move to a vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Thank you. All those against, please show. Any? Please. It's not about shame or whatever. We're voting on a motion, and it's based on the debate we've had. Okay, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. And any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. The motion is carried. We're moving to item number 4, and on the agenda, exclusion of the public. I move that the press and the public be excluded from the following item of business, as well as the YouTube streaming. Mr. Deputy Mayor, will you please second that?
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Those all in favour? Thank you. All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, as this is the last item of business to be considered, can I ask members of the public for attending and viewing on our YouTube channel? Can I ask members of the public to leave the meeting, and can I ask live stream to be paused?